I held my wife's hand on the kitchen floor for 45 minutes after she died. And I didn't cry, not one tear, not until 3 days later when I went to put her coffee mug away, that white one with the little blue flowers, and I just couldn't do it. That's when I broke, 3 days after she was already in the ground. I want to tell you why that happened, because that right there is the single biggest mistake I made in 92 years on this earth. I made it for over 30 years straight, and I didn't see it coming until it was way, way too late. This is day 1 of 30. My grandson Eli is behind that camera. We're trying to reach 100,000 of you before this thing's over. If you're new here, my name's Walter Anderson. Folks here in Mason City just call me Walt. The boys at the firehouse called me Doc for 32 years. I'm 92 years old. I was an Army medic when I was a young man. Came home, went to nursing school on the GI Bill, and I rode an ambulance for the Mason City Fire Department for 32 years. 32 years of pulling people out of wrecks on I-35. 32 years of doing CPR on people's grandfathers, people's daughters, people's babies. 32 years of seeing the worst day of somebody else's life, and then driving home at the end of my shift to my wife Mary Ellen and my 2 kids, and sitting down at the dinner table like nothing happened. You want to know what they teach you in paramedic school? They teach you a lot of things. They teach you anatomy. They teach you pharmacology. They teach you how to start an IV in a moving vehicle in the dark. They teach you compression depths and rhythm and shock voltages and all the technical stuff that you better know in your sleep. Because when you walk through somebody's door at 3 in the morning, your body's got to do the right thing before your head is even caught up. But the thing they really teach you, the thing nobody calls by its real name, is how to put your feelings in a box. You have to. If you feel everything you see, you can't function. The little boy hit by the truck, the young mother who's already gone before you get there, the teenager who didn't mean to do it, the old man who's been on the floor for 2 days and his cat ate part of his ear. You see it. You do your job. You write your report. You drive back to the station, and you put it in the box. And I got real good at putting things in the box for 32 years. And then I came home. Here's the thing nobody told me. Nobody warned me. This is the lesson I want to leave you with on day 1 of 30. You can't open the box for just some things. The box doesn't work that way. When you teach yourself to push it all down at work, you start pushing it all down everywhere. With your wife, with your kids, with yourself. Let me tell you a story. September of 1986. I was 52 years old. I'd been riding the ambulance 15 years by then. And we got a call one Sunday afternoon. Heart attack. Young man, 38 years old, doing yard work at his house out off South Federal Avenue. We got there in maybe 5 minutes. He was on his back on the lawn. His wife was there, and his 2 little girls. Couldn't have been older than 6 and 4. Were standing on the front porch watching us work on their daddy. And we worked on him. We worked on him for 43 minutes, and we did not get him back. I had to tell that woman, with her 2 little girls hanging on her legs, that her husband was gone. I'd never done that part before. Usually the police do that part, but the cops hadn't shown up yet, and somebody had to say something, and she was looking at me. So I just told her. I said, "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. He's gone." She didn't fall down. She didn't scream. She just looked at me with the deadest eyes I'd ever seen, and she said, "What am I going to tell them?" And she nodded at her babies on the porch. What am I going to tell my babies? I didn't have an answer. I had just spent 43 minutes pushing on her husband's chest, trying to keep him alive, and I had nothing to say to her in that moment that meant anything. Nothing. We packed up our gear, drove back to the station. I wrote the report, cleaned the cot, clocked out, drove home in my old Ford pickup. That's what I drove back then. And Mary Ellen had supper waiting on the table. Pot roast, carrots, mashed potatoes. She'd made one of my favorite suppers. She always knew somehow. Don't ask me how. She always knew. She said, "How was your day, Walt?" And I said, "Fine." I said, "Fine." I sat down at the table and I ate her pot roast and I told her about the weather and I asked her how the kids were. And she told me about a little boy at school who'd brought her a dandelion at recess and said it was a wedding ring. We laughed about that. And we ate. And we went to bed. And I never told her about that man's wife. Not that night. Not the next night. Not ever. Now, I want you to think about something. I was 52 years old. I had a wife who loved me. I had 2 kids. Sarah was 14, Michael was 11. I had a good steady job and a house and a Ford pickup and a life. And the woman I loved more than anything on this earth sat across the dinner table from me that Sunday night and asked me how my day was, and I said, "Fine." I did that for 30 years. You hear me? For 30 years, Mary Ellen would ask me how my day was, and I would say, "Fine," or "Not too bad," or "Just busy." And I'd tell her about the weather, or about something funny one of the rookies did at the station, or about how the chief was riding my back about overtime. And I would never, not one time in 32 years on the ambulance, I would never tell her what I really saw out there. I would never tell her about the woman who said, "What am I going to tell my babies?" I would never tell her about the kid on the bicycle. I would never tell her about the baby in the bathtub. I would never tell her any of it. Because I had it in the box. And the box was locked. And the box was safe. And the box was killing me. Only I didn't know it yet. It wasn't just at home, by the way. It was everywhere. My daughter Sarah came to me when she was 16 years old. 16. And she was crying about something. I don't even remember what it was now. Isn't that something? Some boy. Some girl in her class who'd said something mean. Whatever it was the whole world to her in that moment. And I sat down with her at the kitchen table and I patted her on the back and I said, "Hon, you're going to be all right. You'll feel better in the morning. Don't let it get to you." That's what I said. Don't let it get to you. She told me about that moment 10 years ago, sitting right here in this living room. She was 44, and she said, "Dad, you know what I remember most from growing up?" And I said, "What's that, honey?" And she said, "I remember you telling me not to let things get to me." I said, "Honey, what's wrong with that?" And she looked at me, my own daughter, looked me dead in the eye, and she said, "Dad, I needed somebody to let things get to him. I needed to know it was okay to feel things. And you never let yourself feel anything. So I figured I wasn't allowed to either." I sat with that for about a week. Didn't tell Mary Ellen. Didn't tell anybody. Just sat with it. Same box, different lock. Now, here's where it gets bad. Mary Ellen, the last year of her life, and she didn't know it was the last year. Neither did I. She said something to me one night in bed that I have not been able to shake since. We'd been watching the news, some story about somebody, some sad story. I don't even remember what it was now. And she turned over on her side and she looked at me in the lamplight and she said, "Walt, when was the last time you cried?" And I didn't have an answer. I didn't have an answer. I'm not exaggerating for this camera. I tried to think. I tried to come up with something. My mother's funeral, my dad's funeral, something. And I couldn't remember the last time I'd cried. Couldn't put a date on it. Couldn't put a year on it. Couldn't even put a decade on it. She just looked at me. She didn't say anything else. She just reached over and turned off her lamp and went to sleep. That was 10 months before she died. And then she died. Right there on the kitchen floor. April 14th, 2022. Hemorrhagic stroke. The kind of stroke where you can see in their eyes that they're still in there, but they can't get out. I'd been a paramedic for 32 years. I knew what I was looking at. I knew there wasn't a thing I could do. So I held her hand. I told her I loved her. I told her she was the best thing that ever happened to me. I told her about the day we met at the church picnic and the lemonade on the yellow dress. I just talked to her, soft, the whole time we waited. She squeezed my hand, twice, and she was gone. 45 minutes I sat there with her. The boys from the ambulance came. They were boys, by the way, kids. Couple of them I'd trained myself, back when I was teaching EMT at the community college after I retired. They walked in and they saw me sitting there on the kitchen tile holding her hand, and they didn't say anything for a long minute. They just stood there. And then the older one, Travis Olson, I'd taught him in '08. Travis came over real quiet, and he knelt down, and he put his hand on my shoulder the way I'd taught him to do for next of kin, and he said, "Doc, we can take her now." And I let her go. And here's what I want to tell you. Here's the whole lesson of this whole entire video. Day 1 of 30, and you can turn it off after I tell you if you want to. Because this is the main thing I came on here to say. I did not cry. I did not cry when she died. I did not cry when they took her body away. I did not cry at the funeral. I did not cry when Sarah hugged me in the church parking lot. I did not cry when my son Michael flew in from Minneapolis and held me in the kitchen doorway for about a full minute and a half without saying a word. I did not cry. I had been so good, for so long, at putting things in the box that even my own wife's dying couldn't get past it. Even my own grief was locked up where I couldn't reach it. It was 3 days after the funeral. I went to the kitchen counter to put away her coffee mug, that white one with the little blue flowers, and I held it in my hand and I just couldn't put it in the cupboard. I couldn't do it. I stood there. I held that mug. And finally, after 32 years on an ambulance and 52 years of marriage and 88 years of being a man who didn't cry, I cried. I cried for about 2 hours, standing at that counter. I cried for the man on the lawn off South Federal in '86. I cried for the kid on the bicycle in '92. I cried for the baby in 2003. I cried for the boy in the truck wreck on Christmas Eve in '78. I cried for every single thing I'd ever put in that box and never opened. And I cried for Mary Ellen. I cried for 40 years of fine. For every dinner where she asked me how my day was and I lied to her with a one-word answer. For every time she gave me a chance to let her in and I locked it down because I didn't know any other way to be a man. for all the things I should have told her and didn't and now never will. I have been crying off and on for 4 years and 1 month. I'm telling you this on day 1 of 30, because if there's one thing I want you to take with you when you leave this video, it's this. Don't put it in the box. Whatever it is, whatever you saw today, whatever happened, whatever your boss said, whatever your kid did, whatever the doctor told you, whatever you're carrying that you haven't told anybody about, whoever asked you how your day was today on the way home, don't say fine. Tell them. Tell the people who love you what really happened today. Tell them the truth. Tell them you saw something that scared you. Tell them it hurt. Tell them you cried in the truck on the way home and you don't know why. Tell them you don't know if you're going to be okay. Tell them. Because here's what nobody tells you about the box. The box doesn't make it go away. The box just postpones it. And one day, maybe in your 40s, maybe in your 60s, maybe like me in your 80s, you're going to have to open the box. And everything you ever put in there is going to come out at once. And it's going to come out on the worst possible day, probably the day you can least afford it. Mine was 3 days after I buried my wife of 52 years, standing at the kitchen counter with her coffee mug in my hand. You don't want to wait that long. Feel the thing while it's happening. That's the whole lesson. Feel it while it's still warm. Don't save it for later. Don't toughen up. Don't be the strong, silent type. Don't tell your kids not to let things get to them. Let things get to you. That's the whole thing. Now, day 1's done. I told you the main one. The biggest mistake I made and the longest one. Tomorrow's day 2, and tomorrow I'm going to tell you about something my dad said to me when I was 12 years old, that I followed for 40 years before I figured out he was wrong about it. It's a shorter story, but it cost me a lot. So if you've got the time, come back and listen. If anything I said today hit something true in you, if you're sitting there in your kitchen or in your car or on your couch, and you know exactly what I'm talking about, hit that little red button down there. Eli says it's the only way we make it to 100,000 by day 30. I'm not asking for me. I'm asking because if I can reach more people with this one lesson alone, then maybe Mary Ellen's pot roast suppers and all those fines weren't wasted. Call somebody you love today. Tell them the real thing, not the fine version. Walk with me. I'll see you tomorrow.